Welcome, everyone, to a Football Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Check us out on the YouTube channel, as if you are viewing us right now at Rich Q on Q, hashtag BYP all over the map. And as always, don't forget, Monday through Friday in the evening on 102.9 The Game in Tampa and Broad Street South. Our guy, our college expert, Nick Cosco, at Nick Cosco 59, college sports for On 3 Sports, voice of RU Wrestling, course, Cal Live Sports, Cal Athletics in our backyard, high school football and the like. All right, so the season now, we're starting to pick up a little bit of steam. I guess we'll start with last week, what transpired between Oregon and Colorado. And Oregon absolutely just ran it up. They waxed them. And now a lot of people believe, Nick, that we might have the same type of scenario on Saturday against a very good USC squad. I still think USC is going to win. I don't know if they're going to cover by 21, 22, 23, but what is this game going to tell us about Colorado? Because last week, real quick, we said if they got waxed, then all of a sudden, maybe you take a step back. If it's back-to-back weeks and they get waxed and Sanders' kid doesn't play well, maybe the bloom is off the rose a little bit.
Yeah, that seems to be the assumption. Now, I know we said last week if they got beat badly, we're still going to pay attention to this week because they're at home, they're playing USC, it's Caleb Williams, it's still Deion Sanders. We know the case, but looking at the schedule ahead, I mean, me personally, as a Deion fan, a Colorado guy who, I'm very interested in what their story is. Even if they got blown out, I'm still going to pay attention. I think there's a narrative out there that says we're not going to care about or pay attention to Colorado if they get blown out by USC. I think that's completely false. Now, if they get blown out by, back-to-back by two top 10 teams, okay, that happens. Then you see where this team still has to go. Yeah. And like Deion said last week, get your shots in now. You better get me now, but this is the worst we're going to be. That quote went viral last week. That was the big theme of the post game last week after getting blown out in Eugene. Now, do I think they're going to get beat that badly this week? Probably not. Is USC going to win this game? I would say yes, USC is going to win this game. Close to covering, mind you. I know it's a 3-touchdown swing there, but I would say USC is the overwhelming favorite in this game. I can't see an upset this week, but I think they'll at least play better Colorado because they're at home and they don't want to have another game like that. I know they're missing Travis Hunter, but he's not going to make up 35 points. But the theme of the year now, if they're 3-2 and they say if this game is non-competitive mostly, they're at Arizona State. That might be a win for them. Stanford, that could be a win for them too. So right there, they're back at 5-2. You need one more win to be bowl eligible. And I said to you back in the winter, I'd be stunned if this team did not win 6 games this year to get to a bowl game. So the path is there. They're already halfway there, and the schedule helps them out a little bit coming up. Arizona State and Stanford, as I mentioned. UCLA on the road is going to be a little bit tough. Oregon State at home. Right now, Oregon State is a pretty good football team. They're hosting Arizona. You can maybe put that as a win in that column. But then Washington State and Utah, obviously the schedule is tough, but there's a path there for 6 games. So I don't think there's going to be there's going to be less buzz in terms of like, wow, this team is unbelievable and they're great, and the Deion effect is going to take them to the playoff in a year. You know what I mean? So, but I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs still on them because of what Deion's been able to do, of who his son is in Shedeur. Travis Hunter's going to come back. That's going to be a big talking point, of course. So there's still going to be a national story, but as we get deeper into the college football season, because they're not going to be ranked necessarily, they're not going to be in the playoff talks. You're not going to say this is the biggest thing since sliced bread, but there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on them to see if they can get to the postseason, which I very well think they can, and I think they will with 6 wins.
Yeah, well, what'll happen is the focus will start to shift to the big boys, and rightfully so.
Of course.
The win total was 4.5. I'm just wondering, last week we talked a little bit about, Shedeur Sanders versus Bo Nix, and obviously Nix got the better of him, right? I mean, the kid was sacked, I think 6 or 7 times, harassed, running all over. How about this week, right? If he goes out and they lose by 25, 30, but he plays well, is he still in the Heisman running, so to speak, if they get blown out and he struggles and Caleb Williams goes 25 of 30, 364 for 4 touchdowns and no picks? Now, all of a sudden, it seems as though he's really starting to separate himself.
It's interesting you say it that way, where he plays well, but they still get blown out. I think in that case, then he didn't really play well if they're going to get blown out. So blown out to me in that scenario is what they lose 56 to like 35.
What if the defense gives up 500 and something odd yards, but yet, he's harassed all over, but he puts up 20 of 28 or maybe 25 of 32 for 275 and 3 touchdowns, but he sacked 6 times and he's taking a beating. I know
Yeah,
what
I
you're
understand.
saying,
Yeah, no,
but
I understand that. But the, the,
yeah,
the problem is they're going to look at, okay, his overall production. They're going to look at that Oregon game. Then they're going to look at the USC
back to
game
back.
from the lens of, well, yeah, he put up 28, 35 points, which normally probably could get you a lot of wins. But against USC, if you're Shedeur Sanders from an individual standpoint, if you want to put up a Heisman caliber performance, even in a loss, and again, loss is not in their vocabulary in terms of what they want to accomplish. That's with anybody, obviously. But you look at what Shedeur Sanders has to do from an individual standpoint. You could lose, I don't know, 56-49, and he throws 5 touchdowns,
30,
goes for like 450. It has to be one of those shootout losses to say, okay, that warrants a great performance, and his defense let him down. Now, do I think he could put up bigger numbers against USC compared to Oregon? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think USC's defense is still up to snuff. We've seen so far USC beat up, the cupcakes, if you will, of their schedule. And I have not bought into Alex Grinch's defense, and I don't think anybody really has since his days at Oklahoma, because again, Lincoln Riley's Achilles heel through his staff and through his teams is the defense. And USC, yeah, they could probably outscore almost anybody in the country, but there comes to a point where if you're giving up 45, and there's nothing against Colorado, but Colorado's not a playoff team. Just imagine what happens when you go up against a legitimate defense and a legitimate playoff team. And if you're giving up 45 points to Colorado, you have to start asking questions about USC at that point as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't think they win Colorado. I don't think they cover. I think they were exposed last week. I thought a lot of the talk had been him in the fanny. And I think that coach was set on running up the score. And I think you might get that same type of scenario this weekend. They want to shut these kids up, man. They want to shut Dion up. And they want to go out and they want to embarrass them. And what's going to happen now is you're going to see how these kids respond if they're down 35-10 coming out of the locker room for the second half. That's going to
You're
speak
not you're not wrong, but I think that narrative, or that objective of we need to embarrass them, we need to shut them up, I think that was done already. And I think the way Oregon is molded after Dan Lanning is entirely different than what it is at Lincoln Riley. When Lincoln Riley did not say any bulletin board material earlier this year about Colorado, and nor has he done anything up into the lead up. And I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to, whether he invites the cameras into the pregame speech or not, I don't think he's going to have that same type of pregame speech where, they're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins type of line. Dan Lanning knew what he was doing. The irony of it is, you get clicks based on showing this pregame speech, even though you say the other team's doing that. So I know there's a lot of irony about that. I know Dion said he gave his props to Dan Lanning, and that there's mutual respect. And Dion was more talking to the general public about, get me now before we're actually great, where you can take shots. I don't think Lincoln Riley is that type of guy where it's going to be this rah-rah battle of we need to run it up. I think it could happen like that naturally, where, like you said, they could be up 35-10, but I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be a means of like, all right, we're up 35-10 at halftime. I'm going to grill this into you guys where, hey, Caleb, like throw 3 more touchdowns in the second half and let's go up. Let's win this game 56-13. You know what I mean?
No. I know what you're saying. But again, you guys, kids out there, and they're giving up on plays. Then what are you going to do if you're a young running back, freshman getting carries? You're not going to go to in the end zone. Like I'm saying, by circumstance, totally apples and oranges last week. I mean, that coach obviously, was
right. And I like I said, I think this game will be more competitive than last week, because I don't trust USC's defense, but I don't see this game being any closer than, I'll throw a score out there, maybe like a USC 42 and Colorado 24. So maybe they can cover in the end, but I think ultimately you might have a few competitive series, and then the first half might be a little bit close, but then by the time the third quarter rolls around, Caleb Williams is going to do what Caleb Williams does. Colorado's defense is not going to be able to keep up with him. I mean, their freshman wide receiver, by the way, Zachariah Branch, immense playmaker. He is absurd, and he's going to be a problem for a lot. Well, actually, no, Big Ten defense is now coming up for the next 2 years before he goes to the NFL. So I think USC will end up winning this one comfortably. Maybe Colorado covers in the end.
A lot of overblown lines, and rightfully so, 16, 17, 20 plus. I mean, I'm looking at the Florida-Kentucky line right now. Florida's a ranked team, 3-1. Kentucky's 4-0. It seems like the odds makers are giving Kentucky a little more respect, right? Because Florida hasn't won in this series since 2020, but that's sitting at 1 for a 12 noon kickoff.
Yeah, pretty much a pick 'em right there. And I think Florida is not getting the road favorite treatment just because their lone big win this year is over Tennessee. Big win, of course. It was a huge win for Billy Napier for the confidence of the current program, for the future of the program, for recruiting and all that good stuff. But they're going on the road. This is a good Kentucky team. Mark Stoops has done a fantastic job with the Wildcats at a notoriously known as a basketball school, of course. But Kentucky's a rightful favorite, but it's a 1 point line here, so it's basically a pick 'em. I think again, Florida is only ranked because of that Tennessee win. Kentucky does have the argument to be ranked, but their schedule hasn't been anything that's been, you should be knocking on the door saying we should be ranked. But they're both 1-0 in the conference. This game could tell a lot. So if Kentucky wins this game, maybe take them seriously as a dark horse in the SEC East. I'm not saying really to beat Georgia, but a team that could be, second fiddle to Georgia this year in the SEC East. But if Florida wins this game, then I think it's fair to say, all right, Billy Napier and the Florida Gators have now started to turn the corner here in year 2. They'll be 4-1. They might move up to number 20, maybe within the top 20 come next week. And then it's like, all right, can they compete with Georgia and pull off a massive upset? Then it's time to start talking about this immense transformation from year to year under Billy Napier. But as a pick 'em, I am going to roll with Florida. I like the way Graham Mertz is playing. It's not outstanding at quarterback for Florida, but he's very accurate right now. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure he's cut down on the turnovers at least so far this year. I don't think Kentucky's a world beater as they maybe could be in a couple weeks if they were playing a better schedule. But I think I'm going to opt with Florida in this one. Pick them, especially on betting the game. I'll roll with the Gators on the road here.
My only issue with Florida is they're very hit or miss with their offense. I mean, they put up 11 when the quarterback throws for 333 to open up the season against Utah. You mentioned the Kentucky game this weekend. They got Vandy, then South Carolina. Then they have the big test against Georgia. But so far they have, we want to say, have righting the ship, so to speak. Now, granted, 22 last week, 29. That was an impressive win against Tennessee. I'm just looking for a more balanced attack with them, the ground game, the passing game. And this is a game where
I feel like you haven't really gotten that yet. It seems like they're winning weirdly, but it's like, okay, they're efficient enough, but if they actually put it together, maybe this actually could be a pretty good team that's going to be knocking on the door of the top 15 later this year, maybe a 9-3, 10-2 squad.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a good point. Nick Costco from On3 Sports joining us on a Football Friday college football edition of BYP from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. If you sign up now with the rewards card and you get 150 in purchases, they'll give you a little coin back in the pocket. They got the drivers and the wedges as well. They've got new football jerseys in. Apparently, they had a bunch of Rodgers jerseys. They went fast. Zach Wilson probably still sitting on a discount rack.
I mean, an Aaron Rodgers Jets jersey, Rich, that could be a collector's item at this point.
It's
a rarity.
Fortunately, not like Danny Tartable, a couple at bats with the Philadelphia Phillies. Kansas and Texas, there's a good battle, top 25 teams. But again, that line is ridiculous, 16.5. Both squads come in 4-0. Texas is at home in this one. So one of these teams looking to remain undefeated.
Yeah, I think this line is correct in terms of what Texas is bringing to the table this year. The talent gap, I think, between them and Kansas is immense right now. That's nothing against Kansas. Don't forget, Kansas did beat this team a couple years ago, but that's the loss that Steve Sarkisian has said kind of catapulted the faster rebuild and the return back towards the top for Texas. If you remember that overtime loss 2 years ago. But Texas, I think, is just way too good. Too many playmakers all over the place. As good as Jalen Daniels is at quarterback for Kansas, I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with Quinn Ewers, and it's in Texas. If this game was in Lawrence, don't get me wrong, Rich. I mean, Lawrence, Kansas, when that place is bumping, it can get pretty loud in there for a more intimate environment. But because this game's in Austin, it's the 3:30 window. I think Texas is going to be ultimately too much for Kansas. Maybe you have one of those, 21-14 type of games at halftime. But that line, 16.5, I would actually hammer my money on that line right now for Texas. I see the totals at 61.5. I can see the Longhorns putting up 40. So I would hit the over, hit Texas to cover as well. I think there's going to be too much. This will be one of those games where Texas, as the top 3 team in the country, needs to be like, all right, we had a lot of hype around us after the Alabama win, but we've kind of skirted on the radar. Even at that Baylor game the other week, nobody was really talking about that, and they kind of handled them on the road pretty well. So I would say this is a game where it's like, all right, more eyeballs, 3:30 ranked matchup here. Let's just go out and beat this team about 45-20.
Yeah, for the most part, offensive line doing a good job. Ewers has been only sacked 7 times, but you look at the one thing he hasn't done is turn the football over. He doesn't have any
Yeah,
interceptions. So,
that's been a tremendous improvement so far this year. And not that he was horrible with the turnovers last year, but of course we saw the up and down play of him last year, injuries notwithstanding. But this year it seems like Texas has been very sound with the football.
look, they beat Alabama. If they kind of run the table and this kid is putting up pretty decent numbers, do we?
He'll go to New York, absolutely.
All right, that's what I was going to say. We kind of slide him into the.
I think that because we've seen the Heisman, we've seen the Heisman recently, Rich. I mean, aside from Devontae Smith a couple of years ago as a wide receiver, if you're a quarterback and you're piloting in a one loss
You're
or
getting the
undefeated
invite.
team and you put up some pretty good, big numbers, you win a conference title. If you're in the playoff mix, you're going to get the buzz. So I think if Ewers continues to put up good numbers now, he's not putting up Michael Penix Jr. numbers right now over at Washington, but he's got over 1,000 yards, got 9 touchdowns through 4 games. Texas is kind of coasting right now, so I would say if he starts pumping up those numbers, especially with a big performance this week, you'll talk about, all right, Quinn Ewers, maybe we'll put him in the Heisman conversation after the first 5 games.
Yeah, and you mentioned Washington late kickoff against Arizona. How about Notre Dame and Duke? So again, you got the Fighting Irish 4-1. They're ranked 11th. Duke is ranked 17th. I mean, somewhere Dave Brown is smiling, and they're at home. Duke is, but Notre Dame is a road favorite, laying. It's right now 5.5. I saw it open at 6.5, back down to 5.5. It's probably going to sit and settle right at 6. That's a game where it entices the recreational bettors where, well, let me just take Duke in a touchdown pretty much. And I don't know. I mean, this would be a signature win for that program, would it not? Because of who they're playing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care if Notre Dame would get their second loss after this game. If Duke would win this game, this would be a big time win for Mike Elko and company. I know his name's being floated out there now for the Michigan State job among, maybe 6 to 10 other candidates after that whole debacle with Mel Tucker. But Mike Elko has done a hell of a job rebuilding Duke and turning that into a legitimate ACC football team. They're top 20 right now. The way they beat up Clemson, I would say the school formerly known as the national champion Clemson Tigers.
Right.
Duke looks really good right now. And Riley Leonard, I know people are talking about him as like, it seemed, I don't know about you. Do you notice a lot of these Josh Allen comparisons to all these big quarterbacks that are coming out of nowhere?
Strong
I'm not
arm.
going to go.
Yep.
Strong arm, big dude. I'm not going to go
kid.
there, of course, but he's piloting this offense pretty well. The passing stats are really not there for him in terms of like, wow, you're jump off the stat sheet, but he's a big boy. He can run the football as well. Duke has a big time ball control type of offense. Yep. And I think they want to play a similar game to what Notre Dame used to do. Of course, Notre Dame now has Sam Hartman, so they can really open it up in the passing game by comparison. But I think Duke is a interesting play this week, especially even if they're still a home dog. You mentioned it moved to about 5.5 plus 5.5. I would take a flyer on that. I do think Notre Dame's going to win this game. I think it's going to be a very competitive and close game. And I think the Irish need to, at least to themselves, bounce back after that heartbreaker last week where you have 10 men on the field, came down to the very last play. We're looking at this Notre Dame team completely different if they stop them at the 1 yard line instead 100%. Last week with 1 second left. So, but I think they're reeling a bit. So it's a matter of, all right, does Marcus Freeman and company, do they bounce back in a big way on the road against a formidable Duke team, or do they just start falling backwards? Now they're going to fall to their second loss, and Duke's a team that's going to be pushing on the door of the top 10. And we're talking about Florida State and North Carolina right now in the ACC. If Duke wins this game, I think it's time to start talking about Duke in the ACC title picture for sure.
Yeah, start get a little logjam. You notice I didn't say Daniel Jones. I said Dave Brown, supplementary draft. The kid Leonard has a little Jones in him, right? Or vice versa, a little scrambling, running the football here and there. They're averaging about 5 and 6 a pop. So right.
Are you trying to tell me the Giants should look into Riley Leonard for next year?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to say I'm done with Duke quarterbacks. I was scoured for about 20 years after Dave Brown. I'm okay with Danny Nichols. Lastly, you mentioned the Mel Tucker situation. Kind of got the fallout from everything. They made it official. Obviously, on 27 and Q, our clip kind of went viral. That's the big man's got his thoughts and opinions and whatnot. We talked about this a while ago. It's just a situation where you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. It looks bad. Common sense, it didn't prevail. And I would be hard pressed to think he's going to get that money, but that's not here nor there. Right now, the fallout, you mentioned there's potentially 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 candidates. I mean, do you think Michigan State, obviously they'll just kind of play it out as is right now, let the season come to an end, but what are you hearing and who do you think would be the best fit and who would want this job?
That's the biggest question, is who actually wants this job. Now, on the surface, Michigan State, quality program, quality institution in terms of athletic funding, what they're going to do for you, the resources you can have to build a Big Ten staff. Now, again, whoever's going to get this job now is probably going to jump into one of the super conferences, i.e. super conferences, which is the Big Ten and the SEC right now. So to get there, are you coming from the ACC? Are you coming from the new look Big 12? Are you, where are you coming from exactly? The thing is, now with NIL and the transfer portal, we know, I mean, I guess if you have Big Ten and SEC branding, that's probably your only advantage at this point, because the Big 12 rebranded itself without Texas and Oklahoma. Who knows what the Pac-12 is going to do, Pac-2, whatever they're going to do. The ACC is now in a bit of a limbo, but unless you're one of the Big 3 now at this point, which is pretty much the majority of the Power 5, how much movement are you going to get in the coaching cycles? Now, a guy like I mentioned before, Mike Elko, is he going to leave Duke for Michigan State? From a football sense, that does make logical sense, right? For what he's done at Duke, can he do that at Michigan State? Mel Tucker, when they brought him over from Colorado initially, yeah, he won 6 games, but he was there for 1 year, and then he was very average the first year during that COVID year. And that, again, throw it out the window for everybody. I don't care if you were good or bad. The second year, they explode. And then last year, they weren't good. This year, they won their first 2 games, but or at least when he was coaching, non-conference cupcakes. And then now once that whole mess happened, the team kind of unraveled and exposed all right, this was probably going to be an average team this year. So Mike Elko makes sense to me. I've seen Jonathan Smith's name thrown out there, the Oregon State head coach. He's done a heck of a job with the Beavers. But again, you don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-2. Where does Oregon State go? And Washington State, do they end up joining a conference? Does the Pac-12 rebrand itself? Does Jonathan Smith want to say, I want to leave the West Coast, come to a more formidable conference and also a more stable situation in terms of Power 5 money, chances for the playoff, chances for better recruits and all that stuff. So those are 2 guys that I think make sense from that perspective. I know I've seen Brian Hartline's name was thrown out there, the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. Does he stay within the Big Ten for the head coaching gig? We've seen it before. Sean Lewis, how about him? Offensive coordinator for Colorado. I think he's one to watch out for a head coaching gig at some point. Maybe not this year, but at least next year, based on what Shedeur Sanders has done for the Buffaloes. But I think off the top of my head, I think the 2 big fish, so to speak, would be a Mike Elko from Duke or a Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. Those 2 guys, I think you should target. I'm sure there's going to be other guys with other Michigan State ties that are going to be in there. And as far as a decision timeline, we've seen it last year. Wisconsin fired Paul Chryst last year. Mid-season, Jim Leonard was a hot candidate to go from interim to permanent head coach, but they hired Luke Fickell before the season was even over, and that's when Fickell was still coaching Cincinnati. So could we see that again before the winter? I think we could. I don't think Michigan State's going to sit on this too long. I think they'll ID their guy probably by the end of the regular season. So once you see the postseason, you're going to say, all right, Mike Elko, do you want the job? Jonathan Smith, do you want the job? And you'll probably have to wait till the regular season's over, but I think they're not going to wait on it. They'll eye their guys, I think, relatively soon.
Yeah, I would also say, just to add as we close it out, I think they should do it relatively soon. Don't rush and hire potentially the wrong candidate. I mean, stick with, your convictions, who you're going to hire. But also the flip side of that is, well, now you might have 4 or 5 really good players or some redshirt freshmen that are probably thinking to themselves right away, I want to enter the transfer portal, right? And they're seeing, I keep, we started it, we end with it. Deion Sanders in Colorado, all right, Michigan State's got a couple really good players on their team that you just don't know if they're not satisfied. I mean, it's crazy to say an 18, 19-year-old kid not satisfied with the head coach in college, but who's to say they might not jump? That's what I'm saying. You need to get someone in place sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, the names I floated out there, they're obviously in current jobs. I even on some of these lists I saw, I mentioned Jim Leonard before, how, he did a decent job with Wisconsin considering the circumstances. He's over at Illinois right now as an analyst. So is that a guy that could take over a Big Ten program, knowing where he was before as the DC at Wisconsin? He knows the conference, former player himself. Could he immediately be plugged into that job? He seems like a no-nonsense type of guy. I think that's what Michigan State really needs at this point. But you mentioned the transfer portal aspect. I mean, the longer Michigan State goes about this, you're right. I think a guy, now we're just using Deion as an example, but any coach is going to say, all right, who can we take from Michigan State? Who can we convince to start transferring now, play for us next year, enroll in the winter, and get them up to speed for 2024? They're looking at that, because right now it's a cupboard that could have some diamonds in the rough, could have some nice players that could say, you know what, I don't like the situation. The coaching search is taking too long, or I'm not going to like the new guy they bring in. So let's hit the portal now. Especially, you mentioned the young guys who, can save a year of eligibility. They played in their 3 or 4 games, can keep their year of a red shirt, and they say, all right, I'll see you. I got my 4 games of game film. Let me go play for Colorado. Let me go play somewhere in the SEC. Let me go somewhere else. So I think it's this could get really bad for Michigan State unless they do the right things leading up for this next head coaching search.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and stuff gets misconstrued. It is what it is, but we give our opinions, and we stand by them. You start to look more and more in this situation. I'm not going to get into the legal mumbo jumbo, but you almost look at Mel Tucker and say, this guy's a freaking fraud, man. I mean, it's just, and people don't want to hear it, and I'm sure I'm going to get backlash for it. And okay, fine. And as you mentioned, you wipe out the 1 year with COVID, and then, you turn around and you had success. You didn't have success. You got paid a substantial amount of money. They had 2 overwhelming seasons. They won 11-2. They didn't win the Big Ten. Then they came pretty damn close. Then all of a sudden, you get a
that was I mean, realistically, Rich, that was it. That was it. That 11-2 year was it. That's the year that, they beat Michigan. Essentially, Mel Tucker, the way this is just my opinion. The way I break it down is Michigan State took a chance on a guy who won 6 games at a Colorado football program that, as we know, we're talking about Deion, has been dormant for 20 years and has not been good at all. And they're like, that guy won 6 games at Colorado. Yeah, let's give him a shot. Yeah, and then you go from the COVID year where I think they were 3-5, 4-6, something weird, and then all of a sudden you come out of the woodwork, you beat Michigan in East Lansing. So you host Michigan, but you beat your in-state rival. You go 11-2, you beat Pittsburgh in the Peach Bowl. I think it was the Peach Bowl, and then so you win a New Year's Six ball game. You win 11 games, and they're like, all right, well, he didn't even win the game yet, and they're like, here's your new contract. It set a new precedent. And I think they jumped the gun. They made a poor financial decision to this guy for 1 year, for 1 great year. I get for the recruiting aspect and for perception, you want a long-term commitment, but the guy's already signed to a contract. I think he initially signed a 5-year deal, maybe. I forget, so don't quote me on that, but you're already committed to the guy for a handful of years, and 1 good year like that could lead to success the next year. And then that's when you have your domino effect. And then, the people, I mean, I guess people don't forget, but they beat Michigan that year. They got blown out by Ohio State right after that. If they had beaten Ohio State that year, then you're looking at, okay, that's a Big Ten title team. This team got blown out by Ohio State. I'm pretty sure it was the very next week on national television. It was like 49-7 or something like that. So I think they put all their eggs in one basket. Michigan State did, in a guy like Mel Tucker, who was maybe an average head coach at best. Now he set the bar for these big coaching contracts, these long-term commitments, which we've seen now. James Franklin got a new one, obviously. So, but he, to me, has earned a little bit more at Penn State, despite not winning the Big Ten for the last 7 years. But he's won a Big Ten title. He's been to the Rose Bowl. He's won the Rose Bowl. So hasn't been to the playoff, but James Franklin is more of a guy who deserves it at Penn State than Mel Tucker did at Michigan State. So now, off the field stuff notwithstanding, that's Mel Tucker. That's the biggest problem, and that was their out. I mean, I'm not gonna throw a conspiracy theory to say that's they wanted to fire him, but they needed an out. But this was almost like the perfect storm of, like, you're not performing as a head coach, that you're doing this on your own time that goes against all of our policies and your contract language. So now we don't have to pay it. Now we don't have to pay it. So again, there will be lawyers, as the saying always goes. Will he win money? Will he win it? Will he win his suit against Michigan State? Remains to be seen. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. I can't predict that at all. I'm just going to say, with my best educated guess, he's not going to win because he violated his contract language, and then 100%. Michigan State has to move on from another scandal. Absolutely.
Clause in the contract. Look, with a huge contract, I don't care what it is, what walk of life, sports, if it's media, it's what we do. If it's coaching, if it's being a teacher, whatever the hell it is, you're making money. Huge contract comes what? Huge expectations, and you have to carry yourself a certain way. And again,
you go. I mean, just on the field, 11 wins 1 year. Next year, you do 5 wins, miss the postseason. Yeah, that's a big red flag to me.
Yeah, no doubt at all. All right. Appreciate it as always. I know no high school football this weekend. You got the postponement rescheduled for Monday, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So Mainland's taking the field on Monday at 3. Schedule for next week for us at Cable Atlantic Live is to be determined for Friday night. But of course, we'll let the good folks know once we get that information.
To be determined. Follow Nick on Twitter at Nick Costco 59, and of course College Sports on 3 Sports, voice of RU Wrestling, Cal Live Sports, and always kind enough to join us on a Football Friday college edition of BYP from our good friends over at Played Against Sports. Appreciate a couple moments, pal.
Absolutely, Rich.